Sometimes there comes a moment in your life when you can only say one thing from within: I have no strength left. But wait, have you really lost your strength? Or is it that you're no longer meant to intervene? Have you ever wondered, why does it feel like no matter what you do, justice doesn't work for some people? Why is your right taken, your voice silenced? You want to curse from within, but something holds you back. Your heart says cry out. Your soul says be silent. Right there, at that exact point, there is a very critical threshold, because everyone can cry out in pain, but not everyone can entrust their matter to God. Ibn Arabi says, a person's greatest test is not being wronged. It is trying to take justice into their own hands. Because when you take justice into your own hands, you remain, but when you entrust it to God, you step aside. Have you ever noticed this? Some people burn you, but then strange things start happening in their lives. You didn't do anything. You didn't speak. You didn't explain. You didn't defend yourself. You just quietly said from within, my Lord, I leave this to you. And then life starts speaking upon them. But look, there's something very important at this point. Entrusting to God is not staying silent. Entrusting to God is definitely not suppressing. Entrusting to God is not denying the pain. Entrusting to God means saying, I cannot carry this burden. And this sentence is not weakness. It is the highest state of surrender. So why can't some people stop themselves from cursing while others quietly step back? Why are some prayers made with anger, and others with just a deep breath? And why is it that sometimes when you do nothing, everything gets done? In this video, we will talk about exactly this silent power, from Ibn Arabi's perspective, what it really means to say, I entrust this only to you, and why sometimes staying silent is the highest call for justice. But let me say this from the start. If you've reached this point, this is not a coincidence. People often think this. Justice comes through speaking. If you explain yourself, if you prove yourself, things will be fixed. But according to Ibn Arabi, the truth is the exact opposite. Real justice begins when you become silent. Pay attention. People whose rights are violated usually talk a lot. They're the ones defending themselves, justifying themselves, proving themselves right. But you, as you stay silent, you burn inside. And this burning is often misunderstood. People say, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you defending yourself? Why aren't you crying out? Because everyone knows how to cry out, but not everyone knows how to surrender. Ibn Arabi says, every injustice that befalls a person is the final exam of the ego. If the ego rises at that moment, justice is delayed. But if the ego steps back, divine balance comes into play. Now, think about this. When you truly entrust something to God, a silence comes from within. This silence is not emptiness, that this silence is the burden being lifted from you. But most people make a mistake here. They think entrusting to God means forgetting everything. No, entrusting to God is letting go without forgetting. The pain is still there. The memory still stands. The heart still aches. But you are no longer making decisions with that burden. According to Ibn Arabi, the most dangerous thing is wanting justice in a hurry, because a heart that rushes has not yet been purified, and an unpurified heart can contaminate even justice itself. That's why some people's punishment is delayed, because the issue is not them. The issue is dissolving the attachment within you. Look, there's a very subtle point here. If you feel relief when you curse someone, that person is still inside you. But if emptiness forms when you entrust them to God, that's where the attachment begins to break. And when the attachment breaks, you no longer interfere. Life interferes. Time interferes. People interfere. You just notice. I did nothing, but everything happened. Ibn Arabi explains this as divine balance. Balance is established, not by your intervention, but by your withdrawal. Why sometimes the greatest justice is not even forming a sentence, not even making a defense, not even uttering a curse. Because when you become silent, truth speaks. And truth leaves no one halfway. Some pains force a person not to scream but to become silent, and those looking from outside misunderstand this. They think silence is weakness. They think stepping back is losing. But according to Ibn Arabi, stepping back is the most forward move. Pay attention. When someone wrongs you, two paths open before you. Either the ego speaks or truth speaks. Both cannot speak at the same time. When the ego speaks, sentences multiply. You explain, you try to prove, you respond, but the heaviness inside doesn't pass, because the ego speaks but continues to carry the burden. When truth speaks, you become silent. This silence is not escape. This silence is releasing control. Ibn Arabi says, a person's real test is being able to give up when they have the power, being able to wait when they could take their rights, being able to surrender when they could curse, because everyone can curse, but not everyone can entrust their matter to God. Entrusting to God means saying, I am no longer the judge of this matter. And this sentence is very heavy for the ego, because the ego wants control, wants time, wants speed, but divine justice doesn't rush. It moves slowly but never misses. Look, some people leave your life slowly, not suddenly, not with fights and noise, quietly, seemingly without reason. According to Ibn Arabi, this is the moment when justice works most clearly, because you are no longer making decisions from within that attachment. The attachment has dissolved, and when the attachment dissolves, you notice the things that used to tire you no longer shake you. The same name, the same face, the same event, but the reaction inside you is gone. This is where justice begins, because justice first works from the inside. Everything you see outside is a reflection of what's inside. That's why Ibn Arabi says, not the one who seeks their right wins, but the one who can let go of their right. Because the moment you let go, that matter is no longer your burden. Some think that the person who entrusts has forgotten. No, forgetting is different. Not forming attachment is different. You remember but you don't carry. You know but you don't bear. You see but you don't take inside. And this state sets you free. Interestingly, justice speeds up exactly when you give up. It speaks when you become silent. It establishes order when you step back. According to Ibn Arabi, God's justice works, not with your anger but with your surrender, because anger contaminates truth, surrender opens the way. That's why sometimes doing nothing is the greatest thing. Some people hurt you, then they turn and look, asking why you stayed silent, because they're used to you defending yourself, used to you explaining, telling, proving, but one day you become silent. That day, the balance shifts. According to Ibn Arabi, silence is sometimes the highest voice, because that voice neither appeals to the ear nor pleases the ego. That voice directly touches the divine order. Look, people usually think this: if I speak, I'll be understood. If I explain, right will find its place. But most of the time, the opposite happens. Where you talk too much, right becomes blurry. Where you explain too much, value decreases. Ibn Arabi says, truth doesn't have to be explained. Truth sustains itself. That's why some people leave your life without owing you an explanation. Some injustices don't ask for answers. Some breaks are resolved not by talking but by letting go. And right there, entrusting begins. Entrusting to God means, I no longer carry this burden. But this sentence is not weakness. This sentence is putting the burden in the right place, because as long as you carry it, you get tired. But when you let go, the system starts working. According to Ibn Arabi, divine justice doesn't measure a person's patience, it measures a person's attachments. Are they still holding on, or have they truly let go? Most people say I let go, but continue talking inside. They respond inside, they fight inside, but real letting go is silent. There's no need for defense even inside. Pay attention. If a matter no longer excites you, no longer angers you, no longer interrupts your sleep at night, the attachment has broken there, and when the attachment breaks, justice begins. Justice doesn't always appear immediately. Sometimes months pass. Sometimes you think you've forgotten. But the divine order doesn't forget. Ibn Arabi says, if an injustice done to a person has been left with patience, that injustice becomes an invisible weight on the path of the one who committed it. You don't see it, but they carry it. You'll notice they can't progress. They always stay in the same place. Things always remain unfinished. And meanwhile, you pass through another door. This is why sometimes the greatest revenge is doing nothing. Because when you become silent, life speaks. When you step back, order comes into play. According to Ibn Arabi, God's justice works not by shouting but by establishing balance. It is silent, but certain. It is slow, but never misses. And a person understands this best when there's no longer any need to prove anything. Sometimes a person realizes this. What hurts them most is not the event that happened, it's the attachment they still hold within that event. According to Ibn Arabi, pain is not something that happens and ends. Pain is what is held inside. And most of the time, a person doesn't want to let go of pain. because they think if they let go, emptiness will remain. But that emptiness is not loss. That emptiness is making room. Pay attention. The people who tire you most usually do these things. They constantly force you to explain. They make you defend yourself. They push you to prove you're right. Ibn Arabi says, the person who starts proving their rightness has shifted from their center, because right stands at the center. It doesn't need defense. Right at this point, your soul begins to tire, because you're no longer dealing with a matter. You're dealing with an attachment. As long as the attachment doesn't break, the event doesn't end. People leave, words are forgotten, time passes. But if the attachment remains, the burden remains, and the one who carries burden cannot rise. According to Ibn Arabi, sometimes God doesn't remove you from an environment, a relationship, or an argument. He detaches you from the inside. On the outside, you appear to be in the same place, but inside, the attachment has dissolved. That moment isn't noticed, but its results are very clear. One day you wake up and understand, the things that used to trigger you are now ineffective. The sentences that used to squeeze your heart now feel emptied. Where you used to say, I must respond to this, you now remain silent. This silence is not passivity. This silence is changing position. According to Ibn Arabi, when a person moves from one level to another, they first lose their old reflexes. The need to react decreases. The desire to control fades. The fire to prove dies down, and this state is the most dangerous moment. But for the other side, because when you become silent, the other side is left alone with their own voice. When you step back, they face their own intentions. Divine justice works right there, not with noise, with silence. Ibn Arabi says, justice doesn't come like a slap. Justice is a mirror, and a person is forced to look at the mirror most when they're alone with it. Your job is not to hold the mirror. Your job is to step back. When you step back, the burden is lifted from you, but the order changes everything. And without you noticing, life carries you to a different track. Now, pay attention. Everything I've explained up to here brings you to a single point. According to Ibn Arabi, a person's greatest mistake is this, expecting justice to come immediately. But the divine order doesn't rush, because when God corrects something, He doesn't just fix the result. He transforms you to. Look, the moment you realize this, a great shift happens in your life. When you become silent, things don't end. When you let go, the process doesn't stop. When you step aside, order doesn't collapse. It clarifies. Ibn Arabi says, sometimes a person thinks they've lost, but actually, they've dropped the burden. When the burden goes, a feeling of emptiness comes. Most people turn back right at this emptiness, because they misunderstand the emptiness. That emptiness is not loneliness. That emptiness is not being abandoned. That emptiness is the silent space of divine intervention. When God elevates a person, He first empties their hands, because new things cannot be carried in full hands. Here is the most valuable point I promised you. According to Ibn Arabi, justice is not what happens to your enemy. Justice is the state where you can no longer stand in the same place. One day you notice that the things that used to crush you no longer touch you. The sentences that used to make you feel guilty are now meaningless. The faces that used to make you tremble are now ordinary. This is not them changing. This is your position changing. And when position changes, divine balance establishes itself. There's no need for your intervention, no need to cry out, no need to want revenge. Ibn Arabi says, the strongest person is not the one who seeks right, but the one who entrusts to the right. Because the one who entrusts has left the outcome to God, and a file that God takes never remains unfinished. In the end, you understand this. Some people didn't leave your life. You left their level. Some pains didn't end. You stepped out of being inside that pain. Some accounts didn't close. You stopped being the person carrying that ledger. This is true liberation. Now turn and ask yourself, is what you're still holding on to really your right, or is it just habit? If it's habit, let go, because God has already taken over the order long ago. There is one final truth Ibn Arabi wants you to carry with you. The person who learns to entrust doesn't become weak. They become untouchable. Not untouchable because nothing can hurt them, but untouchable because what hurts them no longer controls them. This is a different kind of strength, not the strength of fighting back, but the strength of not needing to fight at all. When you reach this place, something remarkable happens. The people who wronged you start to feel uncomfortable in your presence. not because you said anything, not because you did anything, but because your peace exposes their chaos. Your silence becomes a mirror. They cannot escape. Ibn Arabi says, the one who has truly surrendered carries a light that darkness cannot understand, and darkness always flees from what it cannot understand. This is why some people will try to pull you back into arguments. They'll provoke you, they'll test you, they'll push your buttons, because your peace disturbs them more than your anger ever could. But you don't need to respond. You don't need to prove, you don't need to explain. You just need to stay in your position, the position of one who has entrusted everything to the one who never fails. And from that position, watch how life rearranges itself around you. Watch how doors open that you never knocked on. Watch how people leave who were never meant to stay. Watch how peace settles where chaos once lived. This is not magic. This is divine order working through surrender. Ibn Arabi dedicated his life to understanding this truth, and now it has reached you, not by accident, not by coincidence, but by design. That the question is, what will you do with it? Will you keep carrying burdens that were never yours to carry? Or will you finally say those words that change everything? I entrust this to you, my Lord. And then, with complete trust, step back. Justice will find its way. It always does. Your only job is to let it.